What stupidity. What stupidity. Okay, other things that I hate. So last week, I made it sound like the Stephon Clark case in Sacramento was a little more clear-cut than it was, and I want to correct myself on that because I think that it's important that we get as much of the truth about this as possible. So here is the actual tape of what happened with Stephon Clark. So here is, first of all, the introduction to that tape. Police responded to reports of a broken window. David French over at National Review describes it. And when you watch all the released footage, you can see the initial response is pretty calm and casual. Two officers politely knock on a door. They ask permission to search a backyard. They find nothing, and then they walk back to the street. Meanwhile, a helicopter overhead spots a person trying to break into a car and then jumping a fence and moving to a neighboring house where he looks in a car window. And that person is Stephon Clark. So he is in the middle of criminal activity. And then he runs to his grandparents' house. There's nothing visible in his hands at that time. The police run to the house. They spot Clark in the driveway and they yell, "Hey, show me your hands, stop, stop." And Clark, instead of obeying, flees to the back of the house. The officers pursue and they round the corner of the house. And one says, "Show me your hands, gun." Okay, so they think that he has a gun. They retreat behind the corner for roughly 1 or 2 seconds. Then they round the corner again. One officer yells, "Show me your hands, gun, gun, gun." And they start firing. And 20 seconds later, he's dead. So the encounter from yelling, "Hey," to Clark to firing the first shot takes approximately 17 seconds. Here is what it looks like on the body cams.
Hi, what's going on there?
Yeah, this guy's going down the street breaking windows of cars. He busted both my truck windows out. He busted in the people's backyard right now, across the street from my place. He busted 2 of my windows out and he broke the car's window out across the street from me.
Okay.
Pointed in people's backyard right now.
Do you know which yard he's in, what the address is?
Oh, I can't see the address.
Is he black, white, Hispanic, Asian?
He had a hoodie on. I couldn't tell, man.
We have 2 ground units coming too that are on Meadowview right now, so they're about a block and a half away.
Yep, the dogs are going crazy in the backyard, so I think he's still there.
Good.
Just broke the window, running south, running to the south. So let's get more units back up. Running south, he just broke the window, I believe, on the house. But he's one house to the south right now, going to run. Okay, he's running towards the front yard. All I can tell is he's got a hoodie on. He's running towards the front yard of 29th Street. 29th Street. He's looking into another car that's in between the fence and the front yard. So ground unit Scott, so it looks like might be getting one at gunpoint. Copy, one at gunpoint. Okay, let's get a perimeter on this. Guy's running south. He's going to hit this field. He's at one further house to 1 yard to the south. 2 minutes trying to catch him.
Hi, Cordelia, go ahead.
Sorry, shots fired. Shots fired.
Up 916-650-715.
Show me your hands, gun! Show me your hands, gun, gun, gun! 5-7 shots fired, subject down. You good? Yeah, I'm good. All right, I'm gonna reload. All right, go. I got you. Go. You got a light on him? Got him. Let's go. Hey, when you guys want to go hands, cover them, or cuff.
Okay, so as you can see, it's really difficult to see what's going on there. It's very difficult to see. And so I wouldn't want to be unfair to the officers by saying that they went in there with the intent to kill or anything like this. But does this look like something negligent to me? It looks like, I mean, the amount of time that he's given to respond is very short. Now, should he have immediately obeyed the officer's command? Yes. I mean, this is rule number 1. When an officer tells you to do something, you obey the command. Also, should she have been breaking into cars? Probably not. This is not a good idea. However, that said, does that mean that officers are completely free from fallibility in these sorts of situations? The guy was unarmed. He was unarmed, okay? And when he comes back around, they say, "Show me your hands, gun, gun, gun." And I mean, you can hear it. It's right on the back of it. It's not "show me your hands, gun, gun, gun," right? It's "show me your hands, gun, gun, gun." So they don't even have a chance to give him a chance to respond. And I think David French gets this right. He says, before you object and tell me that routine encounters can and do escalate, I know that. But what I'm questioning are probabilities and perspective. Here are some questions. If it's dark, police are sprinting, and flashlights are shaking, what are the chances that the cop's first assessment that the suspect had a gun are wrong? What was the reasonable risk of backing off and continuing to give strong verbal commands rather than immediately moving from cover to an exposed position and opening fire? What are the possibility that the suspect hadn't heard the commands at all? There's some evidence that he may have had earbuds in. Also, what's the background level of risk here? Sacramento hasn't seen a cop shot and killed in the line of duty for almost 20 years. And it's true that cops have seconds to make life and death decisions, but you know who else has who has just a couple of seconds to figure that out is the suspect. So if you don't give the suspect a chance to respond, then what exactly are you supposed to do? This doesn't mean that these cops are going to go to jail, as I sort of suggested last week. It's possible that they won't. It's possible that people will find their story convincing, or at least they will find it justifiable, or at least excusable. But there are some problems with training, I think, among some of our police officers, and certainly this does raise questions about deadly use of force by police officers and whether they should be so quick on the trigger in some of these particular situations.
That and other issues we'll be going over with Dr. Gorka. But first, as I mentioned, I just came back from Sacramento. And guess who's in town to give the eulogy for Stephon Clark, the black man who was shot by the police? Officers assumed he had a firearm. In fact, he had a cell phone. He was running. He was resisting orders. There is some video, but there is an issue because you hear one officer say, mute, and suddenly you lose the sound. You still see the video, but you lose the sound, leading some people to believe that there might have been some sort of discussion about some sort of cover-up. Never mind that one of the officers is black, as is the suspect. Never mind that the police chief of Sacramento, very popular, newly elected, newly there. I don't know whether it was an election or was he appointed, but he's a new guy. And we'll check that. Would you find out whether he was elected or whether he's appointed? Anyway, he's very popular, and a number of people said positive things about him. We're going to try and get him on the show. And he's now turned over the investigation to the state AG's Department of Justice. So why it is that there were protesters disrupting the city council meeting for the second time, protesters disrupted the Sacramento Kings gang. I mean, think about that. You spend some money to go to a game. You're trying to get in. You can't even get in because protesters are there protesting something you had absolutely nothing to do with. And why is it that you're being inconvenienced for that? Anyway, guess who's in town giving the eulogy?
Well, one of the things I think we need to make clear is that this is a funeral that should not have happened. This is an unarmed young man going in his grandmother's house, 5 feet from where she sleeps, and he was shot at 20 times. Justice must be served. This is not the first incident in Sacramento. And unlike what the White House said yesterday, this is not a local issue, it's a national issue. And it needs to be addressed nationally as people mourn here today. So I think that what we are going to say is the life of this young man is not expendable. The community has come together, all religions, all races, to say that we cannot continue to have unarmed people shot and killed by those that we entrust to protect and serve.
Where do I start with this nonsense? Over the last 45 years, according to the Center for Disease Control, police shootings of blacks are down 75%, while police shootings of whites pretty much flatlined. Washington Post a couple years ago talked about the police shooting that took place, I think it was 2016, shootings that resulted in killings. A little under 1,000. 250 of them were black. 500 were white. Now, some people are saying, well, Larry, there are way more white people than there are black people, yet there are only twice as many white people shot and killed by the police as blacks. That must be a problem. Well, you have to look at rates of offending. Most of the homicides are between young people. Most of the black homicides are between young people. And almost 50% of all the murders in this country involve black victim, black perp. Almost 50%. A young black male is 7 or 8 times more likely to be murdered than a young white male. The number one cause of preventable death for young blacks in this country is homicide. The number one cause for preventable death for young whites are accidents, including things like car accidents. The Washington Post reported that out of all the people that were killed by the police, less than 4% were white officers shooting an unarmed black man. Now, because so many police departments now have blacks, and you have departments now that have black police chiefs, I'm in Los Angeles where we had back-to-back black police chiefs. There was even a black police chief during the O.J. Simpson case. So in order for people that are making the argument that there's still this kind of racial profiling and racial injustice going on, they have to argue that once you put on the uniform, you cease being somebody who is sensitive and empathetic to blacks because you are a black person. Your allegiance now is to the department, and whatever unlawful activity they're doing, you're going to continue to perpetuate. That apparently must be the perception. How else do you explain it? How else do you explain people in L.A. still accusing the LAPD of framing O.J. Simpson when Willie Williams, the black police chief, did a thorough investigation to determine whether anybody involved in the case did anything inappropriate, came back and he said no. Nobody cared. Nobody gave a rip. Now, I pick up the newspaper when I'm there, and there's an article in the Sacramento Bee. Who is Al Sharpton, the man eulogizing Stephon Clark? And I thought they were going to talk about who this guy really is and why he is hardly somebody who has the moral authority to come to your town and bitch, moan, and whine about how unfair things are. I thought that's what it was going to be. It says, here are 5 things to know about Sharpton, a native New Yorker. Okay. Number 1, Sharpton's career began at the podium at age 4. He frequently preaches Sunday services after hosting MSNBC's Politics Nation. Can I stop there for a second? Can you think of anybody else in the country who has a TV show, $5 million light in taxes, having become famous by falsely accusing a white man of raping a black woman, demanding that the white man sue him for defamation if, in fact, I'm lying? The white man does. He loses. Doesn't pay the money for a long time. His supporters pass the hat and ultimately pay it. This is a guy who once said in an interview, quote, if we do not have a justice system that protects us, what are we paying for? Close quote, referring to taxes. This is a guy who was right involved in the Crown Heights riots, 4 nights of rock and bottle throwing. A young Talmudic scholar was surrounded by a mob shouting, kill the Jew, and stabbed to death after Sharpton helped to turn a traffic accident when a Hasidic Jew hit somebody accidentally. Sharpton turned into a racial incident, all sorts of rumors about how the ambulance didn't come and this, that, and the other. So 4 nights of rioting. A bunch of blacks surrounded a young Talmudic scholar, shouted, kill the Jew, and stabbed him to death. 100 others were injured. Sharpton said, if the Jews want to get it on, tell them to pin their yarmulkes back and come over to my house, close quote. That was a statement that was on a tape after Sharpton denied that he had said anything at all incendiary. Quote, if the Jews want to get it on, tell them to pin their yarmulkes back and come over to my house, close quote. That's not incendiary. That's not anti-Semitic. Let's talk about Louis Farrakhan. Let's not talk about Al Sharpton, though. Freddie's Fashion Mart. Al Sharpton turned what was a dispute between a subtenant and a tenant into some sort of racial thing, and then ignited so many people into being angry. One guy runs in and says, it's on now, all blacks out. Black man comes in with a gun, kills himself after killing 7 other people. Sharpton denied having spoken at any rallies, and then tape surfaced, and he only apologized for referring to white people as interlopers.